strokes, multiplied over hundreds of thousands of AFA Stream visits, could reduce the national debt and maybe increase the gross domestic product. AFA Stream, formerly streaming.afa.net. Improvements to the economy are purely theoretical. Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Well, it is Friday, and I hope that you are all set to have a great weekend. And, it's a good day for America and also for our ally Israel. So I'm very excited to break down, the implications for what a new Trump administration and his cabinet picks, and especially his ambassador to Israel, former Governor Mike Huckabee, signals for all of our domestic and foreign policy with Israel and the Middle East conflict, all of these things going on. So let's welcome in our good friend Joel Rosenberg, who is the editor-in-chief of All Israel News. You can find that at allisrael.com. So Joel, you had let's start with your breaking story from yesterday. When you and I spoke, you were just coming out of a meeting there in Jerusalem. So tell us what's going on and kind of what the landscape is.
Absolutely, Jenna. Great to chat with you and update you on very fast-moving events here. Yeah, yesterday I had the opportunity to sit down with Israel's new foreign minister. His name is Gideon Sa'ar, and he was giving me the first interview that he has done on any American or Israeli media outlet since taking the position as foreign minister appointed by Prime Minister Netanyahu just a week ago. So this was pretty dramatic to sit down with him in his office at the foreign ministry. And I've known him for about 18 years. So I can tell you I've seen him in all kinds of different positions. He was justice minister at one point, education minister. He's done a wide range of things, but I think he is the perfect choice right now for Israel's chief spokesman to the world, both as a diplomat, but also fighting back against the avalanche of lies that are being spoken about Israel and the Jewish people, the explosion of anti-Semitism that's happening all around the world. We just saw Israeli soccer fans being brutally attacked by radical Islamists in Europe, just last week. So there's a lot of issues that Gideon Sa'ar is dealing with from the first minutes in this new role. But I also know that he's somebody who really loves the evangelical people, and he understands the very important strategic alliance between Israel and the 60 million evangelical Christians in the United States, as well as 600 million evangelical Christians around the world. Not every Israeli official and leader does understand that. Maybe at some level in their heart or head, maybe they think about it a little bit. Gideon Sa'ar really gets this, and so I'll be happy to. I don't want to go on and on. There's a lot of issues he talked about. We can break down if you want, but Iran and the threat of Iran building nuclear weapons and Israel having to make some very hard decisions soon about how to deal with Iran, that was his number one issue.
Yeah, and these are going to be really important choices as we move into, second Trump term. And so how is all of that factoring into, perhaps some of Netanyahu's calculations?
Well, I think the happiest person on the planet right now in terms of a world leader is Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu has been the longest-serving prime minister in the history of Israel. And look, in somewhat of a similarity with Donald Trump, is probably the most attacked, most controversial, most slandered, most litigated against leader in the world. Netanyahu is dealing with indictments that he's battling legally right now. But the main thing is Israel under Netanyahu is we're fighting for our lives, right? Iran and its terror allies, proxies around the region are attacking us from 7 directions. And Netanyahu got a lot of support, I will say, in fairness, from President Biden at the beginning of the war. But as the war has gone on, and the radical progressive left of the American people, and it's not even just to the left of the Democratic Party, it's the heart of the Democratic Party, has been pressuring Biden to stop being so supportive of Israel. Biden has started to tie Netanyahu's hands, right? Biden kept pressuring Bibi to essentially surrender. Biden would call it a permanent ceasefire in Gaza or in Lebanon, but it felt to Israelis like a surrender. But suddenly, Trump wins, and wins big, wins the popular vote, wins control of the Senate, keeps control of the House, and starts appointing really amazing pro-Israel people. And suddenly Netanyahu feels liberated. And so I think that Netanyahu will have a new sense of energy and resolve to destroy Iran's terror allies in Lebanon and in Gaza without feeling like he's handcuffed anymore. That's a very big development.
Yeah, that absolutely is, and I think that a lot of these these developments certainly would have been different had the outcome of the U.S. presidential election been different. And so, let's also talk about kind of what's going on right now in the Middle East before we get to Trump's picks for some of these key positions and some of your thoughts on that, Joel Rosenberg. What is the current posture of the conflict, at least moving forward in the next, 60 plus days before Trump takes office? Because I've seen some conflicting speculation saying, okay, if Iran is going to do anything major or Hamas, it's going to be in the next couple of months during the transition time period. How critical is this transition period for Netanyahu to ensure that Israel is safe and secure?
That's a great question, Jenna, and I would answer it in maybe 2 different ways. The first way I would say is if Prime Minister Netanyahu is the happiest world leader on the stage because Trump was just reelected, the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, is the most terrified leader on the world stage that Trump has come back to power, because Khamenei hates Trump because Trump bankrupted his country, and if it hadn't been for Biden coming, quote, to the rescue of Iran and, ending, or at least minimizing the economic sanctions on Iran and giving a bunch of cash to Iran and sort of letting the Iranian regime out of the doghouse over the last 4 years, it's very possible the Iranian regime under Khamenei would have fallen over the last 4 years. Instead, the Iranian regime went into offense and erupted a massive regional war against Israel, America's number one ally. So Khamenei is terrified, and you're right. The question is so that's the first part of my answer. The second part of my answer is I would say this. Over the next 2 months or so, the most dangerous place on the planet will be the corridor between Tel Aviv and Tehran, because the Iranian regime now has to decide if they're going to launch a massive attack against Israel. You would think they're going to do it while President Biden and Vice President Harris are still in power, right? Because once Trump comes into power, while Trump doesn't want wars in the Middle East, he wants to end wars. He's certainly not going to countenance, right, some massive attack by Iran, by the Iranian regime. That's why that's one of the reasons he put an evangelical Christian in as Secretary of Defense, and an evangelical Christian in as Secretary of State, and an evangelical Christian in as ambassador to Israel, because he is sending a message. He is not going to be cowed by the radical religious extremist crazies in Iran. he is going to have a strong pro-Israel, pro-American, ultimately, most importantly, America First policy. And so, so Israelis have to prepare for, even though we're happy that Trump is coming and J.D. Vance is coming and Rubio and Pete Hegseth and Mike Huckabee are coming, as well as all the other amazing choices that Trump is putting into position, they're not there yet. And so that makes the next 2 months incredibly dangerous here in the Middle East.
Yeah, and that's actually a fascinating view of these picks. I mean, and I personally think, and I think Joel, you and I would agree that evangelical Christians are the most pro-America, pro-patriotic, because we understand the worldview of God's institution of legitimate government and how we are supposed to have national security and borders, and also our worldview on being an ally to Israel and supporting Israel and God's covenant that is still ongoing of Israel's right to occupy the land that is currently the subject and has been the subject for thousands of years of this conflict with Palestine. And so for Trump to pick these evangelical Christians in these key positions does signal exactly what you're suggesting, and also even just being very pro-Israel with Representative Elise Stefanik being the choice for UN ambassador. And, she was very influential in her kind of brutal takedown in those those House hearings of the...
Fully justified. It wasn't brutal. It was honest, and it was direct. But you're right. She really scorched those Harvard and Columbia, presidents who couldn't defend their own policies of abandoning the Jewish students on their own campus because it's indefensible. And Elise Stefanik, forgive me for not mentioning her right in the first part. You're right. Stefanik was fantastic on this.
Yeah, and I say brutal as a compliment, frankly, to her, because you're right. It was absolutely justified, and I think we all love to see finally, some of these members of government standing up firmly and saying, no, you can't have, all of this anti-Semitic rhetoric and these really just ridiculous consequences for Jewish students on campus. And so with all of these people that Trump is now positioning, that does signal, I think, not a worldview shift from his first term, but maybe actually a narrowing and a honing in on even more evangelical Christians that will be in these positions of power that hopefully will do more even than Mike Pence did. I know that a lot of our colleagues are very frustrated with the whole Operation Warp Speed and some of the more globalist tendencies of Mike Pence in the first term. And so from these key positions, and let's just start with the ambassador to Israel. Former Governor Mike Huckabee. That to me is just such a strong indication that Trump wants to have the biblical worldview of America's relationship to Israel.
Well, that's true. And let me just make a quick comment on what you just said before I get to Huckabee, who is a fantastic choice. It literally could not be a better choice for U.S. ambassador to Israel. And I'll explain why in a moment. But I do want to maybe push back just slightly. There's certainly been a personal falling out between, obviously we all know this, between Donald Trump and Mike Pence because of January 6th and the events around that. Okay. And I was surprised and actually saddened to see President-elect Trump decide that Mike Pompeo was not going to be part of his administration because I didn't think I thought their relationship was much better. And I don't know if there's an evangelical Christian that served more faithfully than Mike Pompeo, both at CIA and state. But I know Tucker Carlson has a huge problem with Pompeo, and so does Donald Trump Jr. So, so we all knew that Pence wasn't going to be around, but I did think Pompeo was going to be around. And when he wasn't going to be around, suddenly, just last week we learned, that raised a question among many evangelicals. Is Trump maybe not going in that direction, right? Is he maybe wavering, waffling, veering away from the sort of muscular American first foreign policy a national security policy with evangelicals at the helm. But the truth is, no. There was obviously a problem between Trump and his team and Pompeo. That's a separate issue, it turns out. But when you've got Pete Hegseth, a devout evangelical Christian, and a 20-year military decorated veteran becoming the head of the Pentagon, I feel in safe hands when Pete Hegseth gets in there. And I think he's going to end up recruiting a lot of young men who say, okay, this is a military I will serve in, not a woke DEI military, but an America first, take it seriously, kill the bad guys, and win military.
And hopefully Rubio, on the flip side, real quick, on the flip side of that too, I hope that all of these, woke kind of men that pretend that they're women that are in the military will be very incentivized to just see themselves out the door. So.
Yeah, that retire early, exactly. And again, Marco Rubio is going to be is a strong evangelical Christian, takes his faith very seriously. He's going to be an amazing, articulate, smart, strategically savvy Secretary of State. And the first Latino at such a senior level. It's going to be fantastic. I love Marco, and I think he's going to be great. And that's, by the way, a wonderful testimony to Trump healing over time a relationship with an evangelical conservative that he didn't like early on. So that's encouraging. Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee ran against Donald Trump in 2016 in the Republican nomination, but Trump won, and they developed a very close working relationship. Obviously, Huckabee's own daughter, Sarah, became the White House press secretary and probably the best press secretary that he had. So Mike Huckabee is an historic choice to be the U.S. ambassador to Israel for two reasons. First, he's the first non-Jewish person to be appointed to that position in like 2 decades. He's the first Gentile appointed in 2 decades, which, again, I've been happy. I've got no issues with. I'm Jewish myself. I'm an Israeli, so I'm fine with Jewish ambassadors to Israel. Some were better than others. David Friedman was the best ever, Orthodox Jewish and close to Trump. But Huckabee is the first non-Jewish person to be appointed. That's historic in 20 years. But much more importantly, this appointment is historic because Mike Huckabee is the first open, devout, unabashed, evangelical Christian voice to ever, Jenna, be appointed U.S. ambassador to Israel. And what Trump has just done in appointing Mike Huckabee, who's an ordained Southern Baptist minister, in addition to a very accomplished political leader and pro-Israel leader in his own right. Huckabee's been to Israel more than 100 times. I co-led a delegation with Huckabee in December of evangelical leaders coming to Israel. And so, but what Trump just did in appointing Huckabee is signal how much Trump values and takes seriously the fact that 60 million American evangelical Christians love Israel, and that the driving force of pro-Israel sentiment in the United States, of the backbone of the U.S.-Israel strong alliance, is not primarily the Jewish community, though Trump respects the Jewish community, won more Jews than in the past, and certainly in New York and New Jersey, and has appointed Jewish people to very high-level positions. But Trump is signaling that the pro-Israel movement in America is driven by the evangelicals. And to have Mike Huckabee, such a prominent evangelical, who, by the way, I will say also was the first person to say yes when I asked him to serve on the All Israel News Advisory Board 4 years ago. This is a hugely positive development, and it's a little shocking to me, not in retrospect, but at first. I mean, Mike told me himself that he was shocked. He knew he was in the running. He knew that he was being courted, but he wasn't sure that it was actually going to happen.
And he was one of the first,
wow,
which
it's amazing.
It really is. And we're going to have to take a break here, but we'll be right back with more with Joel Rosenberg, who is the editor-in-chief of All Israel News, and talking about, some of these phenomenal picks and the evangelical relationship with the Trump administration when we come right back right after this.
The words you are about to hear are taken from letters sent in by members of the Trinity Debt Management Program.
Dear Trinity, today I'm making my final credit card payment.
Before I came to you, I was in a constant state of anxiety and panic, but now there is hope for my family's financial future.
Working with Trinity made me understand that I'm not alone.
You really do help people.
Your kindness will never be forgotten.
Without Trinity support, I would not have achieved my lifelong goal of becoming debt-free.
We saved a lot on interest and penalties, of course, but the reward was the gift of human kindness.
Trinity has carried me through a very difficult time in my life. You're amazing.
I used to feel so anxious and hopeless. Now I feel grace and peace.
God bless Trinity as you continue to help others become debt-free.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813.
So right now may be the perfect time for you to rethink how you pay for health care. And here's why. This time of year is decision time for a lot of people, but it's also when you can join MediShare and save even more than usual. For many families, joining MediShare means saving about $500 a month, which is a game changer for a lot of people, obviously. But what's more, MediShare members like it a lot. Their satisfaction rate is 98%. Imagine that. And MediShare is a proven thing, too, for over 30 years. It's a Christian community of hundreds of thousands of people now. And here's the thing. If you join before November 15th and you mention the promo code SHARE, they'll waive your application fee, so you save even more right off the bat. I'll give you the number here in a second, but just call and you'll get a price within 2 minutes. And again, the deadline is November 15th. So call now. You'll save even more. Here's the number, 833-44-BIBLE. That's 833-44-BIBLE, 833-44-BIBLE.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. A Christmas controversy brewing across the Big Pond. The Warewell Primary School in Andover, that's in the UK, banned all references to Christmas in the upcoming holiday festival. Parents received a letter informing them the children would not be allowed to mention Christmas in the upcoming pantomime presentation of Jack and the Beanstalk. The school told parents they had to ban all references to the Christian holiday so they could be inclusive of other faiths. Now, the show is presented by a traveling group of thespians who say they typically include a Christmas song around the Yuletide season, but the theater company says school leaders said, absolutely not. Don't mention baby Jesus or Santa Claus. You know, some might call it a war on Christmas, but it's really a war on culture and traditions. And it seems to me if you can't celebrate the reason for the season, then what's the point? It's just another day. I'm Todd Starnes.
Speaking truth with love. This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Welcome back, and we're continuing the conversation with my good friend Joel Rosenberg, who's the editor-in-chief of All Israel News. You can find that at allisrael.com, and we're talking about the relationship between evangelicals, of course, and the next Trump administration, and then also the relationship of Trump's current picks that we are aware of as of today's date, and the relationship between them and their worldview on Israel, and then Trump's foreign policy and America and Israel. I mean, tons to discuss. And Joel, we were talking about, a lot of the evangelical Christians that have been appointed to some of these key positions, which is very encouraging. And this reminded me that Barna's survey ahead of the 2024 election was kind of a scary implication that some, 30 plus million self-identified evangelical Christians could potentially sit out the election. And Barna did another survey, and he was actually on Abe Hamilton's show, Hamilton Corner. For listeners, you can go and find that at afr.net. And I think this was, it was either on Tuesday or Wednesday of this week, but Dr. Barna was on Abe's show and said that according to his post-election research, overall 78% of Trump's votes were from Christians, with the majority of his support from evangelical, Pentecostal, Catholic, and non-denominational churchgoers. So this, to me, Joel, is an indication that not only all of these other priorities like, closing the border, turning around the economy, the America First mandate, as it's now being called, but this is an indication to me that the vast majority of voters, and certainly the majority of voters in America, want strong American foreign policy when it relates to Israel.
Well, that's true. Foreign policy, they want evangelical influence in protecting America and our allies, Israel being the most important ally among them. But Americans want evangelical influence in domestic policy as well. And look, Jenna, in many ways, you are the maybe the prototypical evangelical that was struggling with Trump, right? I mean, obviously, you had worked for him, very different views, and yet, so Barna's assessment, his analysis prior to the election, which we covered at All Israel News because it was a concern. How are evangelicals going to? How are they going to turn out, and who they're going to vote for? And but I think you're also, as am I, because I was troubled by a number of things that Trump did and said over the years. But I think one of the things that happened was Trump ended up convincing a lot of us, look, it's not that our concerns were invalid, but you have to compare those concerns against the horror show of Biden and Harris and how Kamala Harris was getting ready to empower radical, anti-biblical, anti-Christian, anti-Judeo-Christian value policies and personnel in her administration. And it became very clear, I think, to rank and file Christians that it wasn't you couldn't vote or not vote in a vacuum only on how you felt Trump's character or personality, tweets, whatever. That couldn't be the only way to make a decision. That his policies for 4 years were so strongly pro Judeo-Christian biblical values, including ending Roe v. Wade and standing with Israel, and so many other issues. That had to be that had to be weighed in, and that the split between what Trump would do in term 2 when he has more experience and understands better how to drain the swamp and dismantle the deep state and protect the border and all those issues was basically was strong. This vastly stronger argument than, well, I don't want to empower that again because of mistakes that he definitely made. But so I had also been very worried about evangelical turnout. But you just said 79% under Barna. The exit polls actually show 82%. So anyway, somewhere in there show that 82% of evangelical Christians voted for Donald Trump. And I think that turnout actually won the election for him because, yes, he certainly made gains with Hispanics, with African Americans. But if you look more carefully, what type of Hispanic voters and African American voters moved the needle with him? It was largely, not exclusively, but largely evangelical Christians within the Latino community and within the African American community and other communities where people, yes, they had a racial identity, but it was their values that were driving them to Trump and driving them away from Kamala Harris and her, super woke radical leftist team.
Yeah, the communism basically, and I don't think that was, as I've been
that's
saying.
A better way to put it. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a pejorative. It's just an accurate statement of her view, and I think you're absolutely right that for a lot of us that we're very concerned about personnel, about some of the mistakes in the first term. I mean, all of these things. I mean, that's really a question for a primary, and that's why you have primaries. And then once Donald Trump was victorious, then I think most rational people, and it turned out a lot of Christians understood the worldview differences between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris in the people that they would pick. I mean, imagine Kamala Harris's nominees for these positions are just going to be wildly different in terms of their worldview. I mean, she wouldn't have evangelical Christians in these positions. And that's a huge reason why, for the last 3 months leading up to the election, I mean, I just told people, consider the worldview difference. It's not about even, the name at the top of the ticket. It's about everyone else that will populate this administration. And that's proving to be absolutely true. But I want to highlight one thing that you said, Joel, which is that Christians and Christian turnout is absolutely what handed this election to Donald Trump. And I hope that that becomes a clarion call message to the sort of a wing of the MAGA movement that is more of the watering down on pro-life, saying America first means that we can't or shouldn't be as pro-Israel as we have been, and with a clear misunderstanding of what it actually means to be pro-Israel, to welcome in the log cabin Republicans and water down the whole issue of the sanctity of marriage. All of these things, while the main message for this election was that a Trump administration is better than, in literally every single way, than the alternative, that can't be a message moving forward that as long as you're just a little bit more to the right than the insane communist, then it doesn't matter the policies. Because I hope that a Trump administration will look at this and say, yeah, we actually owe Christians a lot here. And this is them and this is us exercising our voice. And we have to be stronger on the issues of faith, sanctity of human life, respect for marriage, all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say there was two key moments for me in the final, weeks of the campaign that I think the historians are going to look back and say, wow, those were two pivotal moments. First, of course, was the assassination attempt against then former President Trump in the Pittsburgh area, right? That moment, and not just the moment, but how he responded by standing up and pumping his fist and saying "fight." I think for most Americans, especially if you were an undecided voter at that moment, you began to think, "Oh my gosh, the people are really literally trying to kill this guy, and he's still fighting for us." That, I think, for broadly speaking, Americans who were just not quite sure about him, they got a big character test there. There was a second moment just in the final days of the campaign, and that was at a rally when Kamala Harris heard someone shout out their praise for Jesus, and she said, "You're at the wrong rally." And that told Christians who were thinking, I'm not sure if I'm really going to vote. I don't know if this, I don't know, maybe it's just not for me. Suddenly they're like, oh, wow, she's just literally said with her mouth what we feared was in her heart, which is we who follow Jesus are not part of her world. And she is not going to defend us. She doesn't even literally want us at her event. Those two moments, I think, were so big. And again, I already said it, but I want to underscore the blow up of the relationship between Donald Trump and Mike Pence and Mike Pompeo in their different ways. It was totally different environments and scenarios, but still, those were the two most the two most solid evangelicals that were, I believe, loyally serving Donald Trump. And so it for many Christians, there was pause. What's going on there? But we now have proof. We literally, if you're a lawyer, if we were in court right now, it's just the case is closed. Donald Trump is turning to very high-profile evangelicals who to not only advise him, but to implement his America First policies. And that tells us that he has not abandoned evangelicals. He has disagreed with and parted ways with some specific evangelicals that, for a range of reasons, were not his cup of tea, let's say. But to go with Pete Hegseth, to go with Marco Rubio, to go with Mike Huckabee sends such a powerful message. And then, of course, the others, Elise Stefanik and others, I'm not sure where she is. I'm not sure where she is religiously, so I'm just not commenting on that specifically. But let's frame it differently for a moment. There was also a concern about, among some, who is Donald Trump listening to on foreign policy? Is it Tucker Carlson, or is it sort of major evangelical figures like Rubio, Hegseth, and Huckabee? Well, it doesn't mean that Donald Trump isn't listening to Tucker Carlson, especially on domestic, sort of America First, muscular America First things. But, Tucker Carlson, and I say this in a friendly way, but he has a very unhealthy view of Israel. I mean, Tucker Carlson just doesn't get Israel, and he doesn't get how dangerous Vladimir Putin is. And there is a sort of a feeling or a value within Tucker Carlson where he's good on some issues, but he really is somebody who wants America to retreat from the world stage and cut loose our allies and friends. I don't know why. I don't really get that. But that's not what Trump is turning to. If you want Tucker Carlson foreign policy in full, you would never turn to Pete Hegseth at defense. Right. You would never turn to Marco Rubio, and you would never turn to Mike Huckabee. So this is telling me that he's listening to multiple voices, but he's made his decision of the people he wants to be both the face, the voice, and the muscle, as it were, of his foreign policy and national security policy. And I sleep much better this week than I have for a while, given that I feel like the Trump team is coming to the rescue. And I also like J.D. Vance. I failed to mention him in this interview. J.D. Vance I don't agree with on 100% on Ukraine, although I understand where he's coming from, but he's super pro-Israel, and he is very concerned about the Iran threat. And the Iran threat is the number one threat facing the American people. Yes, communist China is a very serious issue, and Vladimir Putin in Russia is a very serious issue. But if you're talking about killing Americans, the guy who's killing Americans is the supreme leader of Iran. And so we need a really tough policy. We don't want to go to war with Iran if we don't have to, but enough already. And Trump is sending a very strong message to the Iranian leadership. Your days are numbered.
Yeah, and I think all of this is great analysis, and I agree. And I would highlight to listeners, this is exactly the type of ways that you can be encouraged by the Trump administration, be skeptical of, some people who are in his ear, who, Tucker is not a Christian. He doesn't call himself one. So obviously there's going to be some differences there in terms of worldview, as much as, I agree with him on a lot, especially after he left Fox. There have been some other interesting views I don't particularly subscribe to, some of which you mentioned. But then even with J.D. Vance, it's like, he's great on a lot of things, but we can still disagree while overall saying the momentum moving forward is encouraging. And so this is where it's not just black or white. It's not, if you criticize anything, then you're not supporting Trump and saying that, the America First agenda should fail, that kind of thing. I think we can't be so binary in this context now that we can't actually parse the differences between, some of these voices and what we do agree with and what we don't agree with. And it should always come back to the truth and the biblical worldview as our standard. And overall, I am, like you, Joel, very encouraged by, these picks. And I think it's great that Trump has put them out this quickly, because we could have been speculating, for the next 60 days about who's he going to pick for various roles, who's in his ear, what is his policy perspective on Israel, all of these things we know. And that's actually a very good thing heading into January. So for Christians in particular, when we see, the turnout, when we see these types of really strong moves and signals from Trump that, maybe it's a couple particular evangelicals, okay, but overall, he clearly is not saying I'm done with the influence of the worldview of Christians. That piece of it is very encouraging. So where should Christians go from here in terms of our influence over policy?
Well, the fact that Trump is announcing his foreign policy and national security team first and pretty dramatically is because he really is genuinely worried that the world is on the edge of World War III. Like, that, he's not kidding about that. That's not rhetoric. He's worried that what's going on with Russia, what's going on with Iran, and the threat from communist China could literally explode into nuclear warfare. And he's not wrong about that. So it's important that he's sending these messages first. And it's clear that he's thought about these things, and he picked people that maybe everybody didn't expect him to do. I didn't expect Pete Hegseth at Defense, and I certainly didn't expect Mike Huckabee, even though Mike's a dear friend, and I didn't see this coming. Marco Rubio, I thought, was a very solid and serious contender for state, and so that's really encouraging. But the next set of appointments are going to be on the domestic and economic side, right? You're seeing some of it with it's very interesting. Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk on let's take a blowtorch to the deep state. That's awesome. Like, that is going to be fantastic in terms of government efficiency. Although in any other president who set up a cabinet level position of the Department of Government Efficiency would be laughed at. But knowing what Trump intends to do and the two people he's tasking with doing it, this guy is dead serious. So, but yes, now we're going to watch to see who are the positions, the people that he appoints to sort of guide his domestic, social, and economic policy. But he, interestingly enough, he decided not to lead that way. I'll just add one more thing. In other words, it shows his priority of sending messages to the world first, and then to the American people with efficiency. And we're going to see where RFK Jr. fits in. We're going to see where other people fit in. But I just want to say one more thing about Mike Huckabee. I can't remember back 8 years ago. I don't think that David Friedman's appointment as ambassador to Israel, important and wonderful as it was, I don't think that was one of the first appointments he made. And I can barely even imagine a scenario in which an ambassador to Israel is one of the first appointments that any president would make. But that was important to Trump. And it tells me how close the Huckabee family is, right, and how sweet and endearing, by the way, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders praising her dad. And that's actually, I'll get a little emotional thinking Sarah growing up in the governor's mansion in Arkansas, and now leading it, and but it shows where Israel fits in Trump's heart and in his overall view that Israel is a bellwether. If you don't get Israel right, something's wrong with you. You're not irredeemable, but how people treat Israel in this day and age tells you about their values. It tells you about their understanding of good and evil. If you really don't understand that you have to stand with Israel because they're under attack by evil from every direction, there's something incomplete in your worldview. And that's my central concern about Tucker, although there are some others. And again, he is good on a number of issues. But that was a value message that, I mean, look, that Trump sent ahead of the Secretary of State, ahead of the Defense Secretary position. I mean, think about that. That is not normal. But obviously, those of us in Israel, we could not be happier.
And you heard that message loud and clear. And, this is very encouraging for Christians, and I think overall for Israel, and also for our relationship with Israel, and hopefully bringing an end to the conflict in the Middle East. But Joel Rosenberg, I so appreciate the time this morning and your commentary. I mean, so much here to be thankful for, truly. And for everyone listening, I hope that we will strongly continue to engage as Christians and be influential, because with our vote and with our voice, these are the values that we should be championing. And it's really amazing and a wonderful gift from God that we are seeing a lot of these priorities actually come to fruition. So Joel Rosenberg, editor-in-chief of All Israel News, you can follow him on X at Joel C. Rosenberg, and we will be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
Is your success in life being stolen? Here's Pastor Jeff Shreve.
Unbelief is involved in every single sin. Why did Eve eat the forbidden fruit? Because she believed the devil's lie rather than God's truth. Hey, if you don't believe God, you'll never be a success.
Learn what real success can be like. Join Pastor Jeff Shreve on From His Heart each weeknight at 6 Central here on American Family Radio.
Our words have power. On the next Focus on the Family, marriage coaches Dave and Ashley Willis share an upbeat message about how we can improve our relationships by using our words wisely. They'll have hilarious examples of poor communication from their own family. That's next time on Focus on the Family with Jim Daly.
Focus on the Family is heard each weekday morning at 5 o'clock Central on American Family Radio.
As the world is changing around us, the ministry of AFA is staying anchored in God. If the Lord has gifted you to be a giver, we ask that you remember AFA in your year-end giving. As a good steward, you know the tax advantages of year-end giving. There's a variety of options for giving, ranging from cash gifts to stock donation to real estate. Some of the more creative gifts have earlier tax deadlines, so why not contact a representative of the AFA Foundation today to discuss your year-end gift? They can help you set up your donation now and make it effective by the proper date. Call 800-326-4543, extension 345. That's 800-326-4543, extension 345. Your support is key to our ministry in Jesus' name. Beat the rush by calling now, 800-326-4543, extension 345.
80% of the time, an abortion-minded mother who views an ultrasound or sonogram of her baby will choose life. Here's the story of Candace.
The sonogram sealed the deal for me. My baby was like this tiny little spectrum of hope. And I saw his heart beating on the screen. And knowing that there's life growing inside, that sonogram changed my life. I went from just Candace to mom. Thank you to everybody that has given these gifts. You guys are giving more than money. You guys are giving love.
There are currently preborn centers which do not have an ultrasound machine. Would you sponsor a machine today? Dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Your love could save a life.
Speaking truth with love. This is Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
Welcome back, and what a great interview with Joel Rosenberg, and highlighting the importance of evangelical Christians in key positions, but also Christians as a whole, engaging with our vote, engaging with our voice, and championing biblical worldview values. And we have an opportunity over the next 4 years, and hopefully well beyond that, to truly influence civil government. And this is what we are called to do as Christians. We should be engaging in civil government. We shouldn't just be hiding in our homes and our churches and saying, well, those are the only places that, we can teach the truth of the gospel of Christ, and we are buying into this ridiculous notion of separation of church and state. No, the state should reflect the truth and should reflect the fact that it is an institution that God himself ordained and provided specific limited power with the purpose of securing our natural rights, which come from God himself. And so if we have this worldview of government, we will engage. And I'm very encouraged by the Barna survey of the post-election survey that showed how many Christians did turn out. And I think Joel Rosenberg is absolutely right that without Christians, Trump would not have crossed that finish line. And so really the message that we need to continue to absolutely hammer over the next 4 years, and especially in the first 2 years of the Trump administration, is that Christians are owed not just a seat at the table, but our value priorities in terms of policy. We need to stand firmly on life, on traditional marriage, on religious liberty, all of these things that, of course, have been priorities for Christians, but also the things that we agree even with the godless populists on securing the border, on election integrity, on ensuring national sovereignty, on making sure there's a good economy. I mean, all of these things are grounded in a biblical worldview of what it means to self-govern, to have rights that are instilled by God himself, that are natural rights, not just civil rights. We have the right to the work of our own hands. I mean, even to say that that taxes should be decreased, that's actually a biblical worldview principle. Yes, we render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and we pay our taxes faithfully as good citizens of our country, but that doesn't mean that we are all for the abuse and the taking of property without justification and without legitimacy. I mean, so all of these things come down to biblical worldview priorities and ensuring that our policy is not just grounded in this godless notion of conservatism, but that true, genuine conservative values are rooted in a biblical worldview. And our policy should be shaped by our worldview that is grounded in truth. And so, of course, this goes back to the understanding and the priority that we need to be daily in the Word of God. We need to understand what a biblical worldview is, who the person of God is, the truth of the gospel of Christ, how he implemented civil government for our good, how he ordained the family government, the church government, and the rights that we have as individuals to pursue genuine liberty, which is the freedom to do what we ought, the freedom to worship God, to love and serve him, and to evangelize, to fulfill the Great Commission in civil society, that our government should protect all of these things. And so when we have a comprehensive understanding of where civil society fits into the bigger picture, not just for this temporal moment of American history or even the past 250 years, but throughout the scope of his story, God's story, and how he ordained and established the world with the understanding that the whole point of our existence is to know him, to love him, and come into a saving knowledge of him, then we understand the purpose of civil government and we put it in its proper context. We don't uphold it more than it should. We don't make politics our religion. We don't make personalities our standards. We don't make political parties what we champion, even when they're wrong. But we also don't diminish the importance of Christians' engagement in civil society, which is where, unfortunately, a lot of the church in America has gone. We need to have civil society in its proper, legitimate place so that we can impact and influence our world and our community, truth in community wherever we can. So we need to be daily praying, be in the Word of God, know the truth, know theology, the knowledge of God, and ensure that we understand how we are supposed to participate. And it's a really exciting time. We would be participating regardless of who was elected, because we would be a lot more, I think, on the defensive. Now we have the opportunity to go on offensive. And I think especially with AFA Action, we're going to have a lot of very important policy priorities to advance the biblical Christian worldview over the next, especially 2 years, but 4 years and beyond. It's a really exciting time. So you can always go to AFA Action. I'd encourage you to follow their social media on X or Facebook, whatever is your preference, also on Instagram, and make sure that you're aware and that you want to engage, because AFA is doing a lot, and we exist, of course, to worship the Lord, to serve Him, and also engage the biblical worldview in policy. So it's really exciting. Go into the weekend considering all of these things and how you can make a difference. You can always reach me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net. Have a great weekend.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
The climax of the book of Exodus, the Creator God came to dwell with His people. You can't approach the holiness of God however you want. Jesus understood this when He says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Friends of Israel, bringing biblical truth about Israel and the Messiah. Saturdays, 2 p.m. Central on AFR. This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Key. President-elect Donald Trump continues to fill his cabinet, naming Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to be his Health and Human Services Secretary and North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum to be his Interior Secretary. Bill Malugin has more from West Palm Beach, Florida.
Trump is really starting to go rapid fire with these announcements for his administration. He made 7 of these picks yesterday alone, the last of which happened right here in Florida last night regarding North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. Now, the biggest headline of the day yesterday was Trump's announcement that he is nominating RFK Jr. to be his HHS secretary. Some Democrats have already come out in opposition to that, with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries saying he is not impressed with that pick. And Trump made a handful of other nominations yesterday. Some of those include former Congressman Doug Collins, who Trump is tapping to lead the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton says it's no surprise that Trump is moving quickly with his nominations.
He's already been the president. He knows how to do the job. He knows the kind of people he wants on the job with him. And he campaigned on the promise to shake things up in Washington, to not just go with conventional types of selections. People that want to go, he wants people that are going to go into these departments and agencies and actually clear out a lot of the excess bureaucratic waste and the rot, and make sure that these departments and agencies are working on behalf of the American people.
A special education teacher in Connecticut apologizes and resigns after her anti-Trump rant goes viral. Gary Baumgarten has the story.
Cheshire teacher Annie Dunleavy can be seen and heard making threats to Trump supporters, telling them that they'll end up on a stretcher, gone forever. The school superintendent was quick to distance the district from her comments, saying they don't reflect the school system. He initially temporarily removed her as a teacher, but now Dunleavy has resigned, effective immediately.
Federal agents say a suspected terrorist planning an attack on U.S. soil was taken off the streets in Texas.
Special agent in charge of the FBI Houston, Doug Williams, says Anas Saeed admits to researching how to conduct an attack on local military recruiting centers.
He bragged that he would commit a 9/11 style attack if he only had the resources. And he expressed the desire to join the U.S. military just so he could commit an act once he was inside their ranks.
Alleging he admitted to wanting to use explosives. Officials say the 28-year-old was born in Houston and has family from Lebanon. He's charged with attempting to provide support or resources to a terrorist organization, which carries a maximum sentence of 20 years. Kristen Goodwin, Fox News.
When severe weather threatens, you'll often hear meteorologists talk about severe storm outlook categories. But do you understand them? Robert Thornton explains.
The Storm Prediction Center has 5 thunderstorm outlook categories or levels, with 5 being the highest. ABC 3340's chief meteorologist James Spann says there's some confusion. He prefers phrases like a level 1 out of 5 or 3 out of 5.
The lowest level is marginal. And then
the upgrades are slight, enhanced, moderate, and high. And here's the problem. Most severe weather days, it's on a slight risk. And people hear the word slight and they think, well, nothing's going to happen. There's just a slight chance of severe weather. And that's very confusing. And then the other problem, people don't understand why a moderate risk is a higher risk than an enhanced risk. They think enhanced ought to be higher than moderate, and they're right.
He said another issue is people moving into areas prone to severe weather from other parts of the U.S.
And they're just not used to tornadoes and severe storms. And then you tell them, well, most of our severe weather days are on slight risk days, and that makes absolutely no sense.
He believes social scientists have helped with severe weather messaging.
I think the social science integrating with physical science is going to be a great help in years to come. And ultimately, those risk categories, those words will be tossed out and get in these conferences, and we sit around these tables and go to these meetings, and we wind up doing what's best for us. And that's ridiculous. It doesn't matter what, we're not here for us. We're here to help the public.
He went on to say there are more storms and tornadoes on slight risk days due to there being more days